Salt of the Earth Farm Stories is proudly brought to you by Grig Media. Step into the world of farmers from diverse backgrounds across Australia. Through intimate interviews, host Darren Grigg delves into farming practices, traditions, and the challenges farmers face in nurturing the land.
It's going to be rare to see people not doing anything for conservation. I think every farmer will be doing stuff for conservation in a fairly serious way as we go forward.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Darren Grigg. In part 2 of our deep dive into biodiversity on farms, things are about to get a little more fascinating. I'm sitting by a creek with Dr. Mason Crane, and actually I could sit and talk to this fella all day. We'll explore the delicate balance between farm production and biodiversity, and how farmers play a vital role in preserving a healthy environment. We'll also discuss the growing pressure from environmental markets, the carbon footprint of agriculture, and the magic that happens when different habitats come together. And the off-the-wall questions get a little bit quirky. We kick off part 2 by asking Mason about the role farmers play in managing biodiversity hotspots.
There's so much of our productive land, once covered by woodland and grassland, that is in private ownership. Like very little of it is in national parks. So if we're going to conserve the biodiversity of our woodlands and of our grasslands, it can't be done without farmers. Whether it be a plains wanderer out in the hay plains, or whether it be squirrel gliders or superb parrots in the southwest slopes, if it's not farmers doing it, who's going to do it? Are we going to buy big areas and create new national parks in our agricultural areas? I don't think any government's probably going to do that. So it has to be farmers that do it, and it has to be done right across the landscape. It just can't be done in one area. So by having different farmers right through the landscape doing bits and pieces, whether it be just planting a few paddock trees, whether it be a regenerative farmer that's trying to get native pastures to grow, or a fairly industrial farmer that will set aside their creek lines or their hillsides for conservation. All them little things are pieces in the puzzle that are going to help conserve our wildlife. And I think we are starting to achieve that. Yeah. And I think with the growth of environmental markets and also
Awareness,
people just appreciating what they got, but also probably market pressure as well to do things from an environmental point of view is going to be a big players, where it's going to be more the common thing. It's going to be rare to see people not doing anything for conservation. I think every farmer will be doing stuff for conservation in a fairly serious way as we go forward.
It could become a marketable tool as well, couldn't it, with your carbon number?
Yeah, well, agriculture has a big carbon footprint, and but we also have there's a big opportunity in agricultural landscapes to accrue carbon in the landscape through re-veg or through soil, through pastures. And I think people are going to start doing that. And a lot of it just to offset their own carbon production.
Actually, you mentioned bees before, Mason, and in episode 15 I did a podcast with Leanne. She's a horticulturist, and we talked about companion planting in vegetable gardens. Is this a similar concept in farming?
I think so. Like, pollination's not just done by European honeybees, although for a lot of important plants in grazing, European honeybees do most of that. So a lot of your subclovers and that sort of thing. If you want to have good recruitment and the subclovers to remain there, you need them to produce lots of seed so they can keep coming up, and European honeybees will impact that, same as lucerne production, that sort of thing. So they do play an important role. But there's things like hoverflies, or many of the small native bees also do a lot of the heavy work when it comes to pollinating things, particularly things like canola and that type of thing. If you go into a canola crop, man, hoverflies and native bees are just everywhere. And while there's canola breeds now that don't require as much pollination, they still, having the pollinators there still helps increase production.
I was shooting a video on one of your neighbours' properties a few months ago, and one of the canola crops was going off with bees.
Oh,
And lots of other things I wouldn't have recognised, I guess. Can you tell me about the different layers of trees, like understory and ground cover, and why that's important?
yeah, well, in these landscapes, it would have been a fairly diverse mix of woodlands. You had woodlands that were nearly all grassland underneath, with the odd tree down in the productive areas, the flatter, deeper soiled areas. As you go sort of up the hills, and it doesn't have to be much elevation, the trees will start to get closer, and then your shrub layer will start to come in a bit more. And the shrubs provide a different type of habitat again, so the small bush birds will use them. They'll provide another source of, I guess, feed for not just the birds, but things like squirrel gliders who like to feed on some of the wattles. Then there'll be other things like Bezeria that flower at different times, which is a particular butterfly that feeds on the Bezeria flower, that then lays its eggs on mistletoe, which can help regulate the number of mistletoe in the landscape. So there's all these relationships when you've got that mixture of habitats. And it would have been just in one little landscape or valley like this, it would have changed pretty dramatically as you went up and down the hills, the vegetation.
But it's also a good idea to leave fallen timber for the different insects and so forth, isn't it?
Oh yeah, the fallen timber not only have a big impact on insect diversity, so a lot of different beetles and spiders and that, which are all important in decomposing vegetation and helping sort of put nutrients back in the soil, but it's also important for some of the bigger things like brown tree creepers and small mammals. And it's also important for just slowing the water down and collecting, in a hilly environment like this, you get a big downpour. Even if you've got a fair bit of grass cover, you're going to get some wash come down, whether it be grass, debris, or a bit of soil or rock. Having them logs there is like little ways to slow that vegetation down, capture it, but also to slow the water down so there's more infiltration into the soil. So logs are so important. Like, I think if you went to the Henny Field days and someone made a big plastic log and said this is a great thing to put on your hills and it helps retain moisture in your landscape and slow erosion, people probably buy them and at the same time they'd be burning their logs on their hills. So they play an important role. It's just I don't know, it's a mental thing, I think. Some people think everything has to be clean and tidy.
Tell me about the benefits of fencing off a farm dam with a hardened access point.
Yeah, well, in this landscape, like we're in a pretty rare habitat here at the moment where the creek area and the sort of wetland area isn't grazed, and but nearly every other wetland in this landscape is grazed at the moment or has been drained historically to make way for more grazing country. So there isn't many natural wetlands left, and most of the creeks through here are a little bit different habitat, like they're probably not grassy to the edge, they're mostly grazed. So farm dams are some of the only places that provide these permanent ponds in the landscape. Most of the time they're grazed right to the edge, that's what they've put there for most of the time, for livestock to get a drink. But they are important for things like yabbies and ducks and turtles. But if you can fence those areas off, create a hardened watering point, or have a trough run off those dams, you can create something similar to the wetlands that once were around here. Like, it's amazing how much biodiversity will move into those areas once you let the vegetation grow around those areas.
So the stock aren't pugging up the edges, so the water's going to be cleaner, and we'll get a lot of growth around the edges, and the cattle can still get in there to drink clean water, but only in one little point.
Yeah, so if you have a hardened watering point, the stock can go down there, have a drink and move off. They can, with that, the still cattle will pug it up. It just depends how you design it. Like, if you can get it nice and hard area where they're not hanging around too long, not too much stirring up the mud or, crapping in the water and peeing in the water, they're just going for a drink and going back out again. You can still have a similar effect as if you fenced the whole thing off, particularly on big dams. If you let the vegetation grow there, they will be your filtration system, so they can withstand a bit of disturbance, so they can quickly capture those sediments that are free floating in the water and the nutrients, and use that and then put it into growth, and then something comes and eats it, and then all that nutrition can then get exported right through the paddock. A good example of that's tadpoles.
Yeah.
So, in these landscapes, the main place for frogs to breed is probably farm dams, and they particularly like ones that are vegetated around the edge. So that's where grazing pressure's either infrequent or low or fenced off. Now you can get thousands of tadpoles in there, probably got 3 or 4 different frog species that will use it. All them little tadpoles are little nutrition balls. They're eating the algae that's growing off the nutrition that flows into the dam that runs off the paddocks. Egret will come along, eat a couple of them, then go poo that nutrition out into the paddock somewhere, or they'll turn into frogs, and the frogs only spend the time around the water when they're breeding, and the rest of the time they're out in the paddock. So all that nutrition is moving out of the dam and then back into the landscape again, instead of just building up there, creating a very soupy, I guess, algae and methane producing environment.
Hence the natural nutrient cycling, I guess.
Yeah, and it's such a great way to go if you can do it. Like, not everywhere relies on farm dams. They rely on troughs and that sort of thing. But if you have farm dams, particularly if you've got larger farm dams, fencing them off and trying to only have access to one point, or having it reticulated into troughs, you'll create a very special environment in your farm dam, and it'll be appreciated by a broad range of biodiversity that moves through the landscape.
And for the landholder, just for a nice spot to go.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the big things with doing having a healthy environment on your place. It's not just for your livestock, it can have a really big impact on your well-being and also your enjoyment of working on the farm. And you hear that from many, many landowners, and I know just myself that it helps. And there's studies showing that when recovering from catastrophic events like wildfire and stuff like that, those that have some sort of connection with the environment are the ones that at first are hit hard from the event, but they're the ones that can quickly repair their mental state by watching the environment and understanding the environment coming back.
I'm hearing you. I love it. And I just want to jump in now to mention there's another great episode with Marcus Richardson talking about enhanced farm dams. Some more great information there. That's episode 16 at Laracuna. So how do you measure the success of your biodiversity efforts on your farm?
Yeah, it's a difficult one that everyone's trying to work out. A good way to measure biodiversity and trying to put it into one indices or whatever is fraught with danger, I think.
Yeah.
So I think as a landowner, having a particular thing you're focused on or targeted on, you might, like around Burrumbuttock and places like that, people have the squirrel glider there, and their measure might be the number of squirrel gliders they have on the place. Some people might look at the how well their creek systems are, like are they now clear and and water's been retained. So it's going to be different for everyone. Like the number of living things, species diversity probably is the best, is general sort of way to measure how well you're going for biodiversity.
Yeah.
Because after all, that is biodiversity, species diversity.
Yeah.
And I think having a number of different, not doing the same thing everywhere is important. So having different environments in different conditions at different times is really important thing for biodiversity.
What's that noise we can hear over your shoulder there, Mason?
Yeah, now, so potentially could be a dusky moorhen or a buff-banded rail, might come out in a minute.
Kingfishers come through here?
Yeah, you get sacred kingfisher down here every now and then.
My favourite bird, the kingfisher.
Yeah, no, it's great to have the sacred kingfisher. And if we can get more permanent water bodies, if these bodies along this creek stay a bit more permanent, we might get the azure kingfisher.
Oh, they're rare.
Yeah, and I'm see more and more of them. Not here yet, but down on the Murrumbidgee and different places like that, where there's a little bit more vegetation along the creek lines now because they sort of need to perch above the water to hunt their fish.
I had a career highlight with a camera in a boat. We went up about 2 metres away from a Azure kingfisher one day and just stayed there to get its photo taken.
Oh,
beautiful.
Yeah, no, they're great, aren't they? They're like a flying beak.
Yeah. So, Mason, how can farmers who are new to the concept of biodiversity start incorporating it into their operations?
Well, I think it's probably good to talk to neighbours or people that are doing stuff already. You probably learn a lot from people that might be doing re-veg, or they might be going into a more holistic approach to how they manage. You can talk to organisations like Landcare, local land services in New South Wales, and the CMAs in Victoria. They've been there and done a lot of stuff, so they'll give you good advice, and in some places you might be able to get some grants to help accelerate your journey and get your stuff done quicker than you probably otherwise would have.
Well, it's good to know there's help out there.
Yeah, but I think the main thing is, you know, often when you buy a place, you want to put your mark on it pretty quick. So don't rush into doing your improving pastures, or have a look and get a feel for that land, talk to people, and just give it a couple of years before you get into it. If you're going to do re-veg though, you know, it takes a long time for a tree to grow. So if you're going to get into that, the sooner you get into that, the better. And talking to a lot of old blokes that got into tree planting, you know, in their midlife or a bit older, their biggest regret is they didn't start earlier, because the trees are just starting to look good, and they're just now getting to the state where they can't get around to enjoy it, and they know they're not going to be there much longer, so they won't get to see the full effect of what they've done.
Is there a success story or a memorable experience related to biodiversity on farms that you can relate to?
Well, I think some work when I was with the ANU, we're looking at a lot of these declining woodland birds, and we're looking at the re-veg that's been done since the 90s there, and the bird diversity, and we could show from that data that the impact that landowners have done through re-veg is increasing these declining woodland birds. So like no longer in the southwest slopes are most of them birds declining, they're increasing. There's only a handful there that are to be worried about. The rest of them seem to be doing very well from the re-veg in the southwest slopes. We look at the veg data and we see that veg is increasing in the southwest slopes as well, like woody vegetation, so that's a promising thing. And so there's a lot of good things happening. And, you know, we often focus on all the negative things that we see around us, but we should take time and appreciate the wins that we're starting to see.
Yeah, and thanks to people like yourself. All right, Mason, it's time for some off-the-wall questions. Short answers. These can be a little bit quirky. If your farm could talk, what would it say about the relationship between biodiversity and being a productive farm?
What would it say?
Would it be like a frustrated teenager trying to balance two worlds?
Well, I think it would be relieved over the last couple of years, because it's probably been fairly run hard, and I think it would have a sense of relief, and it would be, I would hope it would be saying thanks.
Yeah.
Because I think it has changed compared to what it was like, and even decades before I was here, it was a lot worse than when I come along as well, I think.
Well, that leads me to my next question. Imagine if you could send a message back in time to the first farmers who cleared the land. What would you tell them about the long-term importance of biodiversity and how to coexist with nature?
What would I say to them?
Yeah, I guess in a lot of ways, they didn't know.
No, like, they probably thought they were doing the right thing, and a lot of times they had to do what they had to do, otherwise the land would have been taken off them. I guess the thing I would say is probably try and talk about the importance of your corridors and riparian areas, and then you need to leave some. I think they did know they had to leave some shade for the stock. That's why we still have paddock trees out there. So they were thinking we need trees. They probably didn't realise that one day that the trees wouldn't be regenerating, because I think the first battle they had was to try and stop the regeneration of trees. Like they probably couldn't have imagined a time when the big old trees weren't going to come up again.
Yeah. Let's say you were given a magic wand that can instantly restore one piece of Australian landscape, be it a woodland, a grazing paddock, or a wetland. What area would you choose?
Depending on where we are in the landscape, I think in the slopes, I think it'd be wetland areas because we've lost so many of them. They're so easy to drain because of the topography that we had here, and it was very easy to clear them. When you go further west, like you still have wetlands and that out there because not much you can do about. You can't get rid of them as much as you can get rid of them up here. So I think restoring a wetland area or riparian corridor would be a great thing to see.
And if you could swap places with an animal in a box gum grassy woodland, who would it be and why?
Ooh. Well, I think the squirrel glider's is pretty good lifestyle, and everyone loves it. So no one wants to try and get rid of you.
No.
And you can glide amongst the trees. Pretty good diet of sugary nectar, a bit of protein from the insects. And, it wouldn't be too bad.
And if there were Biodiversity Olympics, what would be the gold medal event? Tree planting, soil health, or perhaps the best glider habitat contest?
Well, I guess there's a lot more complexity into the best glider habitat contest. Well, there's a lot more things to consider, so you'd have to, I guess, be a bit more of an athlete to understand all those issues.
If you had to pick a spokes animal to represent biodiversity on farms, who would you choose and why? And it could be a glider in a suit.
Well, he's probably not too bad, the glider in the suit, but I think things like squirrel glider or some of the other possums would be a good representative, because in a lot of ways the thing that's important to them is also important to the farmers. They like the best productive parts of the landscape. They like big trees, which is important for everything, and they like a bit of other shrubbery and that sort of stuff around, so they could represent more of the biodiversity than some other species could.
Well, Mason, that wraps up this episode. And I'll tell you what, mate, it's been an absolute privilege to have this morning with you. I've learnt an absolute stack, and I'm very lucky, so thanks for your time, mate.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming out, Darren.
What a champion. He has such a great way of explaining biodiversity. And if you'd like to know more about Mason's career and farm life, episodes 40 and 41 are a great listen. You can follow us on Facebook for more info. Just search Salt of the Earth Farm Stories. Thanks for listening.